All right. Thank you, Arun, for joining. So, this is today's first episode for the Domino Effect. And I'm joining with my co host, Girish Kumar, and our first guest, Arun Ravi. And we just wanted to basically invite Arun. He comes with a lot of various backgrounds. He has done startups, he has done work with big tech, and he's also one of my really good friends from our college days. So, welcome, Arun, on the first episode of the Domino Effect.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here and happy to kind of chat with you guys and about the stuff that I've done. But yeah, again, looking forard to it.
Great.
Yeah, well, welcome to the show, Arun. Yeah, this is
Thanks,
as Wandeep was saying, this is our first podcast, and so having our first guest is very special to us, and I hope it is to you as well. Wanted to full disclosure, as Wandeep said, we've known you for a very long time. We're friends outside of in real life. But just for our listeners, right? Wanted to first start off by talking a little bit about your background in education, right? Just who you are in terms of what your background was from college days into getting into the tech sector. How did that pivot happen from your college to your first job into leading towards your entrepreneurship at Mevoked into what you're doing currently? Maybe a quick introduction before we get started, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm computer engineering major from the University of Arizona. When I graduated, just wanted to work in tech. But again, back then, a lot of the tech was defense related, in Tucson especially. So a lot of the opportunities were very different from, how you view tech now. There wasn't really, Google was there, all these companies were there, but we weren't kind of pulled by, what was happening in Silicon Valley. And the aim was to get a, steady job. And so I worked in Dubai, I worked in India, came back to the US, and then went to grad school. My dad's a doctor, brother's a doctor now. So I've been surrounded by medicine most of my life. And I wanted to get back into healthcare. So I did a master's that was kind of an MS and MS in bioengineering combined together at the Keck Graduate Institute. So I brought in like stuff from Drucker Business School and from Caltech, kind of together. After that, the race then was to get into consulting, right? Everyone wanted to get into consulting, work on different projects, travel. I joined Frost and Sullivan in Mountain View in the Bay Area, and through that was exposed to tech. So, I can code, I've had that experience, but like just being around all these entrepreneurs and founders and hearing all these ideas, seeing what was happening in the space was super exciting. And so went from there to starting Mevoked, which was a great journey. And I'll fast forward so you guys can ask questions about, but after we got acquired, joined Amazon Special Projects, launched a few products, joined Microsoft where I am right now. But I think like the main takeaway from my journey is nothing is linear. A lot of it is a meandering path, and you got to take the opportunities when they come. I think just move forward. As long as you move forward every day, you're going in the right direction.
That's awesome, Arun. Thanks, and that's a great start. I'm just taking a step back, right? I wanted to, what motivated you to get into or what interested you to get into the healthcare space? Was that just because you came from like you mentioned, you came from a family that had, clinical doctors in the healthcare space? Was that something that was a catalyst, or was it just your exposure during college or during your time at Frost and Sullivan? Why was that a passion for you?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I've taken, to be honest, growing up, I took, medicine for granted, just being around it. And I remember when I was in college, I was good with computers, before I got into college. My dad's like, hey, this is a great career. Why don't you do it? And he actually told me not to go into going to medical school. He said, like, he literally said this. He's a vascular surgeon. He's like, I'm a plumber. I go in and fix things. He's like, there's a lot of repetition. You will not like repetition. And he's like, you will get bored and you will want to do something else. Go into the engineering side of it or the science side, the other side, computer science side of it, you'll find it more interesting. And so he was right. Sometimes you hate to admit it, but your parents are right most of the time. So because of that, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Let me try to look at a different way of doing it. And back then we didn't have like bioengineering or biomedical engineering. It wasn't like an actual degree that was offered by the University of Arizona. So a lot of my electives were in bioengineering, biomedical engineering, and with the medical school. And so through that, got a lot of exposure. But after I graduated, I went more into telecom, like general stuff, because that's just where things were going. When I decided to come back for grad school, I came back like almost 4 months before grad school was starting. And I ended up doing an internship with like a stent company. So we were basically, deploying graphs in tubes and looking at Bernoulli's theorem, laminar flow, trying to see how you could look at the actual rate of blood flow and how that would impact, the stent, because we were trying to get approval from, at that time, the European version of the FDA. And I was like, man, this is amazing. This is so much fun. Like, I'm actually building things. And then, yeah, so I was like, okay, I want to get into medical devices. Like, that was my thing. And so after that, my grad school was specialized in healthcare. It's almost like an MBA in healthcare. So from then, I pretty much, was set to kind of stay in the space. But I will say that that internship that I had really opened my
Mm.
eyes to the different things that go into actually making these products, right? Which I think was very important for me to see.
And then you went to your grad school, and you went to KGI, I believe, right, for your grad school. And what was your specialization there? Like healthcare?
Yeah, so it's kind of like they call it a master's in bioscience. So you do multiple things, but it was very hands-on. So as an example, like, we had to do a project to create an artificial pancreas, which means that you have to look at measuring glucose based on the glucose value. Do you give, insulin in? And so we had a code. So I coded the GUI for that, and other parts of the group would develop the engineering side of it. And then you obviously had like an approval side, medical device approvals and this and that. So they would have these really in-depth projects. So that's like one example, where you're looking at everything from, actually taking the samples, getting the readings, and then deploying the actual medicine, in this case, which is insulin. But another project we did with Northrop Grumman, which was for the army, and this was super cool, where we had to basically lyse any biochemical agent. And so we would get a filter. We actually put a semiconductor thing on it we etched on it so that we could run electricity through it while it went through to lyse it, so that it went into this simple kind of tube, and you could shake it and see the color change because we've actually, exposed the chemical agent to whatever is supposed. So it was super cool. Like, the projects were all around that. And so they gave you a lot of options on what to do. So I have some friends who went into bioprocessing, right? I have friends who went into the regulatory side of drug development. So actually, it was a great program where you could choose. You'd have to take some core classes and everything, but you could then specialize after that. And so it gave me breadth that I needed for Frost, So
Yeah, and I think, one thing that's resonating with me, Arun, as you're telling the story, is that, and you've done what very few people or most people yearn for, which is your experience with internships is what actually exposed you, and sort of like that intersection between, call it medical, call it healthcare, call it bioengineering, with your passion for technology, right? Your passion for tech, and how you actually combine the two to find a niche space. And that all started, I think, as a catalyst from your internship to be able for, and then you taking it forward to Frost and Sullivan and forward. I think, and the fact that no doubt you were interested in the healthcare space from very early on, but the fact that you were able to take your engineering background and your love for technology and somehow overlap that with that space, I think very few people, I mean, a lot of people yearn for it. I think very few people actually get the opportunity to get that sweet spot very early on, right? Not
I think so. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, like, actually, to be honest, I was inspired by a lot of my classmates in U of A, because we were all trying to get internships. Like, we were all trying to get internships, trying to figure out where we would work, what we want to do next. And that's the advice I give a lot of, younger people, is that, get as much exposure to as many things as possible, because it's very hard to predict how a career will go. But the more exposure you have to things, the better, kind of data you have to make the decision in terms of what you're going to do next. So yeah, do as many internships as you can if you're in college, no matter what it is, it doesn't matter. All be helpful.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have done internships that have told me not to go into specific lines. It's
Yeah.
validated that,
Yeah,
right?
that's
It's
important
actually
too, right? I
validated.
mean, to know what not to versus what to
Yeah,
do, right? Yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
So now, I mean, few taking us, going around along your journey, Aaron. So you've been in Frost and Sullivan, and we'll skip a few things along the way, but I want to get to the point, or we want to get to the point where, what was that tipping point where you basically said, you know what, I've got the experience, I've got enough of experience in the healthcare and the consulting and tech, and you sort of got to a point where you're super comfortable, it's in your comfort zone, right? What then, what was that yearning of wanting to be an entrepreneur? Because a lot of times, there are people who, what Mark Cuban always says, oh, you're not an entrepreneur, you're a wantrepreneur, right? Everybody wants or has this rosy idea or a glamour idea of what would it be like to start my own business, right? Was there a catalyst somewhere while you were working in your 9 to 5 that basically that where you said, you know what, I want to do something and build something on my own, and you found a niche or a space to do it in, and then what made you finally take that leap of faith, right? Because you never have all the answers going into it. You just have to at some point have the courage to take a leap of faith. So what was that like?
Yeah, and this is, I mean, it's taken building a career to be comfortable with how it happened, right? Like, so what was happening at Frost is, at least my last 6 months to a year, I was just dabbling in a lot of different things. Like, hearing about startups like Mevoked, when we started it, it was like, how do you create emotions on the web? It wasn't, behavioral health, which we turned into. Like, I wanted to do behavioral health, but I realized that, hey, the social media kind of stage was exploding at that time. And I'm like, the like button is super limited. Let's do more. But even before that, like, I have a friend, Arun, we were trying to build a pharmacy management tool, and we were like kind of just pitching around to see what to do. I think the hardest thing is that, like, you want stability while trying to do a startup, and it just doesn't exist. But I can comfortably say what actually was the tipping point for me was I actually got laid off from Frost and Sullivan. And it was like 8 months into like all these different things I was doing. And it kind of forced me to think about, okay, what's next? It was very disappointing the way it happened. Like, no one wants that kind of like exit. You want to exit on your own terms. But it kind of forced me to think like, okay, fine, I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm out of a job. Let me see where it goes. And then a couple months became a year became 4.5 years, right? Like, so in the end, that was the kind of the forcing thing. But I do credit my family, obviously Vasta, my wife, like, to letting me continue doing it. And I think one of the VCs we raised from said, like, hey, you can go do your MBA, you can do anything, but you'll never get an education like this. And he's absolutely right. All the lessons I learned during, doing Mevo, I apply with my team, I apply with my products to this day. So it's a different story, but sometimes, you need that kind of push. So that push was more, kind of given to me versus me trying to take it. So
For Mevo, from what I remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like I think it was the first startup which I saw at that time, which was kind of uh, looking at AI sentiment analysis, like uh, combining that with social media. How did you decide to go into that space at that time? Because that's pretty early on, right? Like AI is pretty popular right now, but this was in 2009, 10, 11, was pretty new.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it came from actually, funny enough, like from ad tech, because at that time, because of how social media platforms were kind of developing, there was a focus on retargeting in ad tech. Like, you
Yeah.
basically go to a link, you go, and how do you retarget? And they were trying to capture emotions, right? They were trying to figure out, like, intent to buy, right? That's what they would call it. And then around that time, I was like, wow, like, we're spending so much time on these devices. You're going through your ups and downs emotionally. Let's see if I can capture that or allow people to kind of give that sentiment. And so that kind of led to the idea of like, hey, let's expand, the like button on social media things. And so we did a lot of very cool experiments. And we had our own webpage where we created a Chrome extension back then where you could, put your emotion on the actual site or whatever content, and it would like kind of stream. Like, if you're like, hey, I want to
Yeah.
see happy content, I want to see what's sad, I want to see what makes me anxious. And then what we did is 2012, we actually created a site around the presidential election, right? Where we basically looked at people marking, articles related to the election, and then had a site, and we could tell by state the sentiment across it. So, the one thing I realized with
Yeah,
startups,
that's
I mean, it's all about timing. It's all about timing.
yeah.
I did something like that 3 years later and stuck with it. It would have been a very different trajectory. It was just the timing of it at that time, and where the money was flowing. But even for Mevo, when we moved into behavioral health, which is more aligned with my background, it was the same thing. I mean, we were pre-COVID when mental health, everything spiked up. Having a platform like Mevo at the time, I think, could have been very beneficial. So, like, in the end, it's all timing, but don't regret the journey. But yeah, but that's life.
Yeah, I mean, definitely about timing. I want to, it's true that it's about timing, but it's also the art of recognizing when to pivot, isn't it? Like, if something you started, like, you in your journey, you started me what trying to do with one vision, and but you also had the foresight to sort of pivot and say, you know what, maybe there is a related path that actually would, either you get, more benefit from, or there's a market or a demand for it.
Yeah.
And so I think, would you say that, even having that sort of foresight, of course, that can't be, I don't think that can be taught in colleges or schools, right? No amount of MBA degree is going to tell you that, right? So, and the, I think people have this, some of the people who want to be entrepreneurs, I think, you read a lot, you see the, Shark Tank, for example, you see people pitch their ideas there. People like, think that, oh, it's a very linear, or if I do step 1 to 10, I'm a very successful entrepreneur, right? But what people don't realize is the blood, sweat, and tears, and you know, those are just words, right? That's very
Yeah.
easy to say that, but when you live it, when you breathe it, when you are in it 24/7, I think it's, we talk about grit, we talk about, just believing in yourself, like whether that's first in yourself, and then people around you or close to you believing in you. I mean, have you, are these things just words, or is this a reality? Is this a reality when you went through your journey with Mevoked?
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy. I mean, I had panic attacks. Like there are days that you just can't move. When I was fundraising, that's when I had my first son, Arav. Yeah, man, it was terrible. Like I mean, it's something. It's hard to prepare someone who hasn't done it. But because of the experiences you go through, I mean, I gotta say, like, I mean, a lot of it's almost like it's like a brotherhood that you form or sisterhood, again, like just, across everyone that you want to give it back, right? Like, I mean, if a founder reaches out to me, I always answer them. I always talk to them. I always ask them, how are you doing, today? Like, how are you feeling? Like, because in the end,
Yeah.
a lot of that was done for me, and I'm trying to pay. It's just a different type of journey. And unless you do it and you live it day in, day out, and it's not like, like I said, like having a job and doing a startup is not doing a startup, right? Like actually doing it, full time where you're yeah, it's dependent on that. You have engineers you've hired, their lives, their livelihood depends on your decisions and what you're doing. You have a board that you need to keep talking to about like your progress and like you said, the pivots, pivoting to find that perfect product market fit. Yeah, it's a hard journey, but like I think the good things out of it is that you learn how resilient you are, right? I mean, you learn what you can actually go through and what scares you. Like and I can talk a little bit about how what I did in Mevoke didn't scare me when I was in Amazon, when you're presenting to like Andy Jassy and Jeff Bezos. But at the same time, like I did 136 VC pitches. You can put me on a stage, I'll talk, right? Like those kind of things just build in. But on the other side, just the emotional support that you get and how you're able to give it to others, I think becomes super important. But it's all these things that kind of like come together to help form you.
How did you stay motivated? Like I know like as an entrepreneur, it's not easy because you're kind of alone, right? At that entrepreneurship level. So with all these issues, right, showing great resiliency, like how did you stay motivated to keep going, keep doing what you were doing and believing in your product?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people try to solve a problem that you're passionate about, right? I mean, that keeps you going. I think when we went into the behavioral health space, I've had two friends commit suicide. So I've always been very, it's always been in the back of my head. And in the end, when I was probably at my darkest time or most difficult time, I'm like, what would they think, right? And I think that in the end, I had to see some finality to what you're doing, like whatever it is, right? It's almost like you need to have some sort of closure with it because it is very hard to do something, not finish it or not see it all the way to the end, and then regret it later. I think Jeff Bezos calls it the minimization regret framework or something like that. He's like, when you're 80, what are you going to regret? Not
Yeah,
what you didn't do, right? So like now,
right.
when you talk about Mevoked, I can talk about the lessons, but I don't like I did everything I could. Like I literally did at that time. I did everything that was humanly possible to make that company successful, and so I walked away very head high, knowing I did my best. So I think those are the kind of things that I think make a difference and help you.
You talk about closure, Arun, and how important that is, right? Is in your journey with Mevoked, was the and maybe there's multiple points to this. So, but it was closure for you when you've done everything you can to grow the company to the stage it was before it got acquired, right?
Mhm.
And so was closure to you where, hey, I've done everything I can. I want to give it to a company that believes my journey, believes the things we do. They just have better or bigger resources that can take this to a lot more people, a lot more reach. Was that closure to you, or was it also the fact that you were able to impact quite a large number of audience, or the purpose, and you're seeing validation, right? So not so much so you're building a product and hoping people use it. You're actually seeing, and that was validating to you, right? What was closure to you? Like,
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think for me, what happened was is that, some of the lessons I learned is you always have to be fundraising. And I think what happened was that I raised money and I put my head down to really build a product. I should have gone, fundraising for my next round. The presidential election around 2016 kind of impacted what I was doing. So you're talking about all the pivots. We pivoted, to a behavioral health platform. We started with teens, went to adults around stress and depression. Around the same time, my wife, had Arav and I put it on the platform and it worked really well. So I'm like, oh, postpartum depression, the postpartum area is a really interesting area. And then I kind of pivoted the company to building like digital therapeutics, right? Basically, there are acute care episodes that cause mental health issues like distress and diabetics, going through depression when you're going through chemo, postpartum depression. So I partnered with cognitive behavioral therapy programs and built it on top of my platform and would give it like a digital therapeutic, like a digital drug, right? And then if there were more severe cases, it would then like help them go see a therapist. And if they needed medication, they would do that. So we had done that. And then the election changed because when Trump came into power the first time, he was going after Obamacare, where a lot of the behavioral health subsidies were put. And so a lot of the customers we talked to said, we don't know what's going to happen. We need to wait 8 months. But I didn't fundraise enough to wait 8 months. So like, that was one of the lessons I learned. And around that time, we were supposed to do a deal with the pharma company, a pretty sizable deal. It just fell through. And then my Series A was basically tied to that outcome. And so when I saw that happening, first thing is, okay, fine, I have a few weeks of money left. You try to make sure that you set up, everyone there into a good position. So I did that. And then Wellbrain that ended up acquiring the assets, and I helped a little bit with the transition. They built a platform for pain addiction, and it was built by three doctors, and they wanted to use the algorithm, the patent that we had around figuring out if somebody was anxious and stressed, and using that to deliver their type of therapeutic around pain addiction, right? And so long story to this final answer, there was a fit where the technology would keep living on and would benefit people, our patients. And so we saw that synergy. So then, kind of, making that acquisition, which was honestly mostly assets, is like was a lot easier to do. And then Wellbrain recently got acquired by a Canadian company. So, kind of the technology is living on, but I mean, what VC told me is like an exit is an exit. No matter what, you build something that other people want. It doesn't that it was a failure. It took me a while to kind of internalize that. But yeah, I mean, everyone's startup journey is different, and I'm just happy that people found value in what we did to keep it to this day.
And you,
Yeah, that's
yeah, I mean, just on that, like, do you actually, are you at a point where, and it's been a few years now, right? But are you at a point where, but I know that it's such a passion project for you that it's never out of your DNA, right? If someone talks about, even if they talk about behavioral science or behavioral sentiment, I'm sure it piques your interest at some level, at some subconscious, even if you're not living and breathing it 24/7 now. Are you curious enough now, or has that curiosity waned over time, where you go back and just check in, hey, how's my technology doing? Yeah, even if it's by XYZ company. Is that something you do, or is it at a point where, hey, I moved on, I'm on to other things now?
It's again, like, really good question. I think like once you're an entrepreneur, you're always an entrepreneur. Like you always, like, you see gaps, you see solutions that you want to build, and it's hard to quiet that. I will say that it's, if I go to Vasa and tell her like my wife said I'm going to start a company, she's like, because she still has like, a lot of that shock from when I did the first time. I don't think it ever leaves you. I think it just comes down to like, what are you weighing against, right? And actually, someone told me that I should write a book about this, because I think like there are different ways to attack entrepreneurship versus coming up with $1 billion ideas and raising a ton of money and not really figuring out product market fit. There's different ways that you can continue being a successful entrepreneur, and a part of that is financial stability as you get older, right? Like, so there's like a lot of decisions. I love seeing the tech continue. So to that question, yes, I mean, and the tech has evolved too. I think now everything that's happening, and especially with LLMs, and people can create mental health LLMs to help support people. Obviously, there needs to be guardrails, supervision, all that stuff. It needs to be there, but it's pretty exciting to see where the industry has evolved. But going back to the thing, I think it's very important. Like, once you're an entrepreneur, you're always an entrepreneur. But I will say this: you can be an entrepreneur. I mean, they call it entrepreneur, so I'm not going to just flip that. But you can be an entrepreneur within big tech. You can be an entrepreneur within these companies. And one of the best segues I've had in my career is going from a startup to Amazon, which, AWS back at that time, I mean, I think a lot of things have changed, but it was the world's largest startup. And it was amazing to be there because it helped with my therapy. of getting into big tech. And so that was also helpful. But there's different ways to approach it. I think it depends on the type of company and the type of outcome you've had, from.
Mm. It's
So how was your transition to the corporate world? I mean, was it an easy transition? So you were doing a startup, right? You went through ups and downs.
Yeah.
What made you say that, hey, like, okay, I'm gonna join a big tech, AWS or Amazon at that time?
Yeah, I mean, so special projects at that time, and they were called grand challenges. The aim was to impact 1% of the world population. So that was the aim of any idea that you had to do. And we would build things, and then what I mean, it literally is almost like a startup idea. Like so, with Compre Medical, everything we built everything. We went to reInvent. We got customers under NDA. We showed it to them. Did a private preview, saw like, oh, health AI, this whole approach is valuable. Then honestly, we went and pitched to AWS to take the team. Like literally, I went and pitched to the VP, then Swami, who's running like Agentic AI now at AWS, and pitched him saying, hey, and Vasi, I mean, he's a Siemens, but like, hey, take us on. We want to build this as an AWS product. And so then they decided, then they said, yes, come over. And then we built more products there. So like, it was almost like they're my VCs, that I had
Yeah.
to, or get funding from. So it was perfect. And the leadership principles at Amazon at the time were very aligned to what you would do in a startup, right? Learn and be curious, bias for action, disagree and commit, deliver results. I mean, those are things that like as a CEO, you never, you don't tell your team, but that's what you expect.
Yeah.
So I think that transition, and you'll see a lot of founders do very well in Amazon, just because of the culture and the impetus to get things done.
I guess I'm curious because healthcare is notorious to be a very fragmented industry, regulations, so on and so forth. When you were working in Amazon building these products, did you feel like, okay, this is a very hard industry to kind of build products in? Any roadblocks you were kind of facing?
Yeah. I mean, so we were the first healthcare product in Amazon's history, right? And there was a lot of people who were against verticalization. They didn't want us to go into verticals. They're like, hey, you need to build AWS for everyone, irrespective of industry. You don't want to verticalize. But if you look at like what Microsoft's done, Microsoft's been a partner in healthcare for a very long time, right? They have a very different strategy around verticals. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, there was a lot of debate within the company. We had to do all our approvals all the way up to Andy. And, there was a lot of like, hey, are we going to piss off customers? Are we going to, make them upset that we're going after things that they do? So yeah, a lot of those discussions were there. A lot of those, you know, I guess, worries were there across Amazon. But I think the way that we looked at it was like, hey, as a customer, see, AWS has a very unique perspective. Like they tell everyone that, hey, Amazon is our customer. Netflix is a customer and Prime is a customer. We're
Yeah.
not we're agnostic to it. We're not trying to pick sides or do anything. So we do the same thing, saying, hey, you're spending millions and millions of dollars on natural language processing. We built an API that can do it much better, and we're going to keep improving it. We'll do that. Andy uses this a lot, and undifferentiated heavy lifting for you. So if we do that for you, you'll build faster. You'll be more innovative. So like it came down to that. But actually, one funny story is that when the Wall Street Journal, we were the first service to make the front page of the Wall Street Journal. When it came out, the first headline said that Amazon is mining your health records. So we all started freaking out because it doesn't do that. And I had to go say, hey, you have a different idea of the service. It's not doing that. Luckily, they changed it before online before we launched. But yeah, it's again, it was a very interesting time and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's also, think about it, right? Because healthcare is very regulated, right? With HIPAA and all this patient confidentiality, and here you are with AWS, a public service, right? In that, any company can, it's like, how do you, and you, of course, there's guardrails, of course, there's controls and all of that, but how do you change the perception of someone in healthcare to say, you know what, I don't know if I want to be hosting my most confidential documents or confidential data on a public, at the end of the day, it's an outsourcing to a company that's not mine, that's not me, right?
Yeah, we made some decisions very early on that allowed us to kind of stay out of that. We were a stateless service, which means that even when we ran the data, we would not. So HIPAA has certain rules how long you can store data. We were less than that. So we had a fast enough throughput where we stored no data through the service. And so we were stateless. We also didn't train on any customer data. Our training data set and everything that we had were through partnerships that were independent of the customers that use the service. So in the beginning itself, we kind of built these, I'll say, first principles, right? And then we use that as a way not only to build, comprehensive medical, we can transcribe medical, and there was Health Lake, and now there's Health Lake Genomics. Health Lake itself has a bunch of different uh, kind of modalities. Like a lot of it was, we were very, very clear about like what we would and what wouldn't do. And I think because we were very upfront about it and we built it into our architecture, we didn't we would have some discussions. Yeah, 100%. Someone or the other, some customer or the other would bring it up, but it was largely like kind of well addressed because of some of the decisions we made early.
And I think you had to make those decisions because you were, again, very highly regulated industry in healthcare versus, some of the other industries probably. Kind of dives into what I wanted to ask next, which was, this whole with the advent of AI right now, all over, people are talking about responsible AI and ethical AI and AI ethics, which you kind of did maybe by force of function because of the vertical you were in.
Right.
Do you see that? Do you see what you do? Do you see, this being a huge industry or space where a lot of attention needs to be, do we need to have like ethical standards across the board? Like, who's the governing body, or is it up to the companies? Did you feel like a lot of investment need to go there, or is it just hype at this point?
I think it's super important. I mean, I think that like a great example is that, if you look at healthcare, health inequity across the US, there are things like social determinants of health that impact the health of a patient. We have like one of the highest infant mortality rates among developed countries, and the data is skewed across ethnicities. Like our healthcare data may not be fair to different ethnicities, right? And if you're training your models on that data, like, are you being fair to every patient that's coming in terms of what the model is outputting? And it's really hard to do that, but you have to keep focusing on it because that is the important. See, the thing that's happening with AI is that, scale is something that these models are doing because you need the scale in order for the models to respond and interact with you the way they are. But another thing that's happening is that we're basically reducing the layer of interacting with these models. Like before, you would have to use SQL, you'd have to use this, that, you'd have to create, build a system. Like it required technical expertise. Now I can use natural language, right? So because of that, people that are interacting with these models are traditionally not the people who have done it in the past, right? So you need to create the guardrails and make sure that it works well for them in a way that they're making the right decisions, right? So we're going to hit this very interesting inflection point where the FDA does approve AI models, or AI, our algorithms. It has done that. But it's going to be interesting where people build SLMs, like smaller language models that have, probably trying to do a specific task, and whether those need to be approved by the FDA because technology has been moving too fast for these regulatory bodies to keep up. And so it's going to be super interesting to see when that inflection point happens. But when it does happen, I think it's going to create some churn before it gets better. But if the companies take that ethos, like you were saying, Girish, around like responsible AI, being responsible, making sure you document, make sure you do things up front, it'll become a lot easier to create that pipeline. But I think we're going to see a lot of that soon, especially with how OpenAI and Anthropic are starting to invest in health.
I
Yeah.
think one related question to that is also for AI to be successful, right? You need large amount of data.
Right.
Uh, and especially like people are kind of worried about like, hey, like this is my personal data, right? On my Apple Watch, on my Aura Ring, right? There's
Mhm.
ton of data which these devices are kind of capturing. Is there like a data privacy issue here where we have to think about, like, obviously like it kind of touches on regulation as well, but like how does companies like AWS or Microsoft think about those things?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the services that are available, like on Azure and AWS, are HIPAA eligible. I mean, they go through all the requirements. We have data deletion requirements based on the type of data. Microsoft cannot look at any of that data. Like we have, it's called like Azure Lockbox, where you have to give us access before. Like, so all the controls are in place. Because to be very honest, like I cannot do anything with your Apple data. I can do something with your financial data, right? So in the end, and financial data has been in the cloud for a long time. So like in the end, there are, it's important all across the board. I don't think one industry is more important than the other, but I think a lot of those guardrails are put in place. I think it comes down to educating the customer, like on what is what and how to use the data, where their data is available. And what you'll see with healthcare is that like the pharma industry tends to be ahead. They've adopted the cloud, a lot sooner. But with providers and payers, there's also a lot of education, customer support that you need to give them in order to do this well. But privacy is always going to be an issue. But I think in some cases, to your point, like going back to your initial point around training data, that's going to be super important, because now we're getting to a point where all healthcare data is siloed, and you have to work with too many players to get that data. I think all the data that needs to be scraped has been scraped. Now, what if AI is creating data? That's going to create this weird loop, right? Because there's no way to correct the hallucinations and this and that.
Yeah.
Creating it, right? So we're getting into a very interesting thing. But right now, like whoever has data is super, like they're very valuable. And that you'll see like Scale AI and Micro One, like all these companies that are, helping you create high fidelity data are getting a lot of funding now, because that's where the bottleneck is.
Well,
So
go ahead, Girish.
I was going to say, I mean, great conversation on AI, and I know we'll continue this conversation. But I want to take a step back, Arun. And so you've been with Amazon, I believe, for 3 years, or that's how long you worked
Yeah,
at
almost
Amazon,
four, yeah,
right?
3 4, yeah.
Almost about 3 to 4 years. And they say that 4 years at Amazon is usually a lifetime at most other companies,
Yeah.
right? Given the the opportunities that you get, that you probably don't get in typical companies,
Hmm.
um, and just the the expectations of what's expected out of you while working. So at what point were you like, because you were doing great in Amazon, it was like a startup culture, you were saying you were pitching to executives there to take your ideas forward and have funding to be able to make it a real product. What made you leave that, which was very closely aligned to what you were doing as an entrepreneur, um, and take the leap to get into Microsoft? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it came to a point where I think that the investments that Amazon or AWS were making in healthcare were great, but they weren't aligned with kind of where I wanted to go. Because the problem is in healthcare, they want partnerships. They want a partner. Like I think some of the questions I always faced when I was at AWS is like, are you going to compete with us? And so that constant question, like, and Amazon has a really good way of answering it. But like a lot of customers like, I don't know. Microsoft, on the other hand, is very partner friendly, right? They have scale motions that they've proven over 5 decades, right? Like, so the thing is that I wanted a different experience. I wanted to learn that other side, like being a partner centric company, which I think Amazon has become now. Since I left, it's been 5 years since I left Amazon. But at that time, I was like, I want to work deeply with the partner to like unblock some of the issues and really learn how to do that, like side by side. And I felt like it was a good growth mindset opportunity for me to learn like something new, something different. And so like that's why I made the switch. And my partner then was Nuance, which we ended up acquiring, right? And which is the basis of the healthcare and life sciences organization that I'm a part of now. So from that perspective, partner to due diligence to acquisition to now, I think it's been a phenomenal experience to see that whole cycle. So yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky that I made the right decision at that time. But yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to get something different and try something different.
And now you've been with Microsoft for, you said, 5 years, give or
Five
take.
years, I had 5 years in September. Yeah,
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
yeah.
So where do you see, so going back to the whole AI discussion, right? It's like, okay, we know that, I always equate AI with, you know, with when the first smartphones came out, right? When Apple first introduced a smartphone where, we were all used to analog or phones or flip phones or things where you could actually physically press a button to dial a call, right? To something that was just all touchscreen, right? Which was uh, I feel like, and so just the whole momentous shift of, oh my God, what's the definition of a smartphone? I see AI sort of in the same sort of tipping point, except it's probably 100x faster, right? In terms of adoption, in terms of what's out there. And I'm curious to get your take on it, because what my observations thus far have been, there's a dime a dozen AI apps in the consumer space. You
Hmm.
want productivity tools, you can get 20 productivity tools out there that you can use today, right? All doing different things, all doing things that are probably very good in that specific niche that they play with, right?
Right.
Where I see the enterprise space is a lot more harder, I think, to solve. I see AI. I mean, it's great that there's a lot of innovation, and I think everybody's trying things out. I don't think anyone's perfected it. I see two things that are important in this year to 2026, right? Which is, you need domain expertise in whatever area or field you're in, be it real estate, be it litigation, be it healthcare, be it whatever, right? And having a platform or a stack Not just, you can't go to an enterprise company and say, hey, I've got 20 AI tools that will do what you are looking to do, right? I mean, they don't talk to each, like, do you see, is that what you are also seeing with your experience with Microsoft? Do you think that's where we're going, where we're basically, needing domain experts to be able to now design, these tech AI suites, or solutions?
All right, let's kind of unpeel that question because I think there's a lot of really interesting parts in it. So, like for example, let's go back to your iPhone example, right, or the smartphone
Yeah.
example. There were smartphones before the iPhone. What unlocked the iPhone was actually the App Store, right, and iTunes. Like that is what unlocked it, right, because it created an industry on a device that everyone wanted to be a part of. And the volume that they had with the iPhone and the App Store, it created economies of scale that we've never seen, create new industries, right? I mean, literally, that was what's happening. So with LLMs, the way that I would compare it, like, or with the AI, I would say vibe coding. Like the vibe coding, kind of the companies that have come that have allowing you to use these models easily to create these apps is now the scale motion that you're seeing across LLMs versus just using a chat GPT to get like travel advice, right? A lot of similarities there. But I think what's really interesting is that with vibe coding, yes, I can create an app, I can go. So, but there's a ton of mistakes that these apps are doing. The models are not trained. The person may not have domain expertise. So there's a really interesting kind of limitation with it, right? Which was also the limitation with an app on the iPhone because you were still playing in Apple's sandbox, right?
Yeah.
Very similar way, there are limitations here. So what's going to be very interesting to see from these companies is that you know AI is burning your cogs, right? I mean, it is expensive to run these apps. It's expensive to run these models. There's no positive margin business model out there yet, but everyone is chasing growth, right? So two things need to happen. One is the use cases need to be super strong, so you have the right unit economics and they scale. And it could be, I can give different examples like real world evidence in pharma. It could be revenue cycle management in healthcare, like whatever, right? Like different use cases. You just need models that work for that use case, and then you can control the costs, right? The second thing is like, who is going to deploy this? Because you have to, even if you have this really cool AI app, you have to deploy to a electronic health record. You have to deploy to some of these older systems. And some of these older systems or companies like Epic are now taking up AI because they're seeing the benefit that they can bring directly to their customers and improve their top line. So I think like we're seeing a bunch of things happening at the same time, but we're also seeing some massive technology companies getting created very quickly too. And I think a lot of what the future of AI will be dictated based on where these companies land and how far they decide to become an enterprise company. Because if I look at Anthropic right now, they remind me of AWS back in the day. They're
Yeah.
developer focused, launching things constantly, pushing, pushing, pushing. It's like literally like it's funny on LinkedIn. One of the evangelists of AWS, he's gone on to multiple things. He wrote like, "This reminds me of AWS." I'm like, dude, me too. Like I feel the vibe coming from that company now, right? And it's scary, it's uncanny, right? So I think like a lot of those things need to land. So again, a lot of different answers to your question,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think that you have to look at it in terms of where it started, where we are, and where it's going to take us. But in the end, where it's going to take us will take a little bit of time, and you're going to see some companies fail, you're going to see some succeed, and the ones that succeed are going to be the ones that really kind of think through these problems, maybe get domain specific, maybe become a lot more cost effective or control like the models and what they are going to do. And I guess we'll see. And also the sophistication of customers will also evolve, right? So those are things that I think come together. And we're seeing that at Microsoft too, right? We're seeing
Yeah.
behemoth platforms for builders and buyers, right? And we should talk about that at some point because I think that's also going to be very critical for the adoption of AI.
Also, what I've seen, like obviously a lot of the software SaaS companies are taking a big hit
Yeah.
in their stock prices over the last month or 2 months. There is obviously a fear of AI companies or native AI companies are going to replace these software SaaS companies over time. Are these fears valid? I'm trying to see
Yeah.
like what you feel, or is this like a pricing fear also? Because a lot of these SaaS companies go for pricing model which is per seat, per user licensing model, and with AI, obviously there might be number of employees might shrink over time. That's a direct impact on SaaS revenue. Do you see this? How does this kind of play out, like from your point of view? And also, like, are healthcare companies also looking at this like hey, like AI native healthcare companies coming into the picture and disrupting
Yeah.
the incumbents?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think like there's two things that we'll look at the SaaS business model. One is like you said, you're giving employees a superpower. Is that going to reduce, to your point, the number of seats? But also the fact is that like, SaaS depended on like not power users throughout, right? The margins they had were like solid, right? So if I have a power user in a SaaS business model, they may be using AI so much that I'm negative margin and now it eats into the margin of a so-so user, right? So even if you have the same amount, the cogs are so high that it's going to disrupt. I think like I've seen blended models where you have like some base SaaS and then there's a consumption side. We
Yeah.
do a lot with the Dragon Copilot for physicians, for example. That's how we kind of find the right middle ground. I think where I'm seeing a lot of stock prices, I mean, SaaS is one thing where I see stock prices get impacted is like, Anthropic's like, oh, we're creating a plugin for legal. And then suddenly legal zooms, stock will take.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think there is a play for these companies, but I think the market is like rapidly reacting to the news, right? It takes a lot of time. We live in a bubble. Like, I mean, we're all in technology. We're all like looking at AI, but like, go to anyone, outside and ask them, if they know what the latest model from Anthropic is and what
Yeah.
Claude do, and
Yeah.
they don't, right? And so I think it's also important to kind of like, look at the technology, see how it's actually going to dissipate, especially some of the stock of the companies that are impacted are generally like Thermo Fisher. Like, I mean, these are companies that have been there for a very, very long time. And I
Very
don't
long.
think business is going to get disrupted that quickly. But at the same time, it's good for them to also like say, hey, we need to keep an eye on it. But I think it's just more market reaction because right now the market is buoyed by AI, right?
Yeah.
Those are the companies that are, like kind of, owning the pulse of the market at this point in time. So
I mean, on the other hand, we're also seeing studies like MIT study. I don't know if you saw it. Like 95% of the AI pilots basically are failing,
oh yeah.
right? So it's like, is AI going to disrupt everything like the incumbents? But you're also saying that AI pilots are failing at a high rate as well. So what is true here?
I think, yeah, I mean, it is, you cannot throw AI at everything in an effective way. So, for example, let me give you a great example. Like in healthcare, the doctor's process is the process. Like if you're not fitting into how they treat patients, what they do when they come in and meet a patient and do after, you can't do anything. You can't throw AI at an x-ray to make someone take an x-ray faster, right?
Yeah.
You can use segmentation algorithms to analyze the x-ray, but you still need, the radiologist to give the final diagnosis, right? Because in the end, if you're diagnosing, that means you have to go to the FDA. There's like a lot of regulatory requirements. So I think like in itself, if you look at adoption in the enterprise, there's some automatic like speed bumps that are blockers, right? That you have to kind of work around. Some companies are just like, hey, you need to use AI, just use it. And I think like it's not really understanding their jobs and what they're doing. So like from my perspective, like yeah, we vibe code, we create apps, but I also use it to do a lot of research. But I have to check the research, right? I mean, sometimes I have to check. There's still that requirement there. So I think it augments me in certain parts, but in some parts it actually like is not as useful as I thought it would be, right? And I think like we'll get to a steady state, in the next 2 to 3 years. But I think the excitement of what it can do, and actually when we go back, 95% I think failed was because like if you took AI and gave it to your team, you'd have to be technical to use it. Now
Mhm.
everyone is using it. So if
Yeah.
everyone is using it, your N has increased exponentially, you are going to have a higher failure rate. I mean, it's
Right.
it's just, your number has gone up, your number of use cases has gone up. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, like just the math of it seems to make sense, but I'm more excited about that 5%. What is the 5% that's successful and is that scalable, right? That's where we need to
Right.
be focusing on.
Yeah.
You know, going into healthcare, or and I don't know, and maybe I'm fantasizing a little bit, or seeing things in the future, right? Or maybe too many sci-fi movies. But you see a lot of AI out there. Obviously, right now it's all about automation and, like you said, ChatGPT style information and all of that. Healthcare, do you see, AI not completely replacing like humans, but do you see at a point where the patient experience is impacted in a negative way? With too much, is there such a thing as too much AI, or where you now need human in the loop or doctor in the loop, or somebody to basically say, because after all, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and so we
Yeah.
still like that human touch. Like how many, I mean, do you really get the same do you really want to be talking to an AI agent bot, when the preference is to talk to a human, understanding that, of course, it may be more efficient. Do you see that's a dangerous path?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I think, like, see, if you look at healthcare in the US, right? The number of doctors is going down. Rural health is in dire need of help. Hospitals are closing down or getting consolidated. We're seeing areas where I think, having that AI interface could be super helpful. And it has to be very specific, right? But think about this. I mean, like a great example. Let's take children's hospitals, right? I mean, children's hospitals across the U.S. like work in a very siloed way, unless there's a relationship between different children's hospitals. If you could create an LLM around the knowledge around leukemia in kids and expose it to Africa, expose it to Asia, expose it to all these countries that don't have that expertise, I'm all for that. Like, I think that is super exciting. I think we need to do that, and I think that should be. I mean, it could be run by the UN or the WHO. Like, that's fine, but that is like, it seems like amazing, right? Like, any doctor anywhere can get that knowledge, right? So that's one side. But it is going through a professional. So then in the end, the filtering is happening through the professional who's been trained on this, right? Then you have the other side, like it's almost like Dr. Google, right? You put in all your symptoms and you always end up at cancer, right? And so you don't want to get paranoid, right? Also about all these symptoms that are happening. But I think, like, in areas where there's rare diseases, you need to get into clinical trials. You've tried everything, but it's not helping you. It could be just, physicians are humans too, and they have limitations in their abilities. In the end, coming with ideas, coming with different perspectives is good. Self-medicating yourself is not good, right? Like, I mean, going and saying like, hey, I think I have this and therefore you need to give me this medication is not good. But I think, like I said, when they brought the 95% failure, I was like, what is the 5% that's successful? I think that's what we need to focus as a society, is like, where is the immediate benefit? How can we get this out? Because there's so much knowledge out there that I think children's hospital, I keep coming there, but like, there's so many gaps there, man. There's so many gaps there. And so I think, like, just democratizing that data and making it available could be super powerful. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So much to talk about AI. Sometimes we don't have the time of the day sometimes to peel the onion, right?
I
So
mean,
what
I also saw like machines, I think it was in China, where they have these kiosks where person can go get a diagnosis using these AI capabilities. Do you see like something like that coming to US as well?
I mean, there's a company that does it. I think it's called Neko. It was started by the Spotify co-founders, and basically, it's like a huge imaging thing that just images your body, does blood tests in real time or like near real time,
Yeah.
and tells you what your health status is. There's another company. I don't think it's called Superhuman. I forgot the name of it. Super something, but like maybe Superhuman, where they basically, in a blood test, they look at 200 different indicators of health. So I think we're getting there. The problem that we face in our health system is it reimbursed?
Right.
Like, for example, a test that, I've taken, I've asked both of you to take it as well, the calcium score, right, around your heart, for plaque. It's a simple image from a CT scan that tells you, do you have blockage in your arteries? And I think it should be mandatory for everyone at the age of 40 to do it. But it's not covered by insurance. That's crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an immediate way to see, like, hey, is someone at risk for a sudden heart attack? Like, why is that not covered, right? So there's a lot of these things that that need to be fixed, I think, with AI. And some companies have decided to take it in their own hands and say, like, you know what, people can afford to pay. See, that's affordability becomes another, like, that's a whole podcast in itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Affordability of healthcare. You're seeing the people who are affording these things are getting it. So I don't know. Did you guys see the Hims and Hers ad during the Super Bowl?
did
It
not?
focused saying
I did not. I don't think so. Maybe I missed it.
people shouldn't be getting these tests. And it
Yeah.
says, like, everyone should have access to it. And so that's where we're getting to, right? Like, how do we make these tests and the advancements in science and AI available to everyone? That's the exciting part. But then it is going to require, kind of changing the old guard and changing how healthcare really is delivered. And, those changes happen over, hopefully fast, but it happens over a period of time.
Do you see AI being a forcing function in changing regulation? Like maybe that's always been the case, but maybe the speed of AI is now acting as a bigger force to basically, because regulations, like you said, like when we talk, I mean, why AI? Even like driverless cars, right? I mean, we see autonomous cars out there, but the reason why not every car on the road is autonomous is not because of technology
Yeah.
challenge, it's regulation challenge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
so
agree. I agree. I think it's going to be a forcing function. I do agree. I think the hardest thing is that the FDA is understaffed. A lot of these agencies are now understaffed. They may not have the right kind of like educational background to make these judgment calls as well. But there are ways to get through it. Like, again, it comes down to the use case, what you're exactly trying to do, and what you're trying to achieve from it. But I agree. I mean, I think it's a great forcing function, and that example of driverless cars is a great one because it's forcing people to regulatory bodies to do it. The good thing about the U.S. is that the state has a regulatory opportunity as well as the federal, so state can make certain changes if they want, if they see the benefits, and you see progressive states like California doing it, and so that's going to be super interesting in the long term to see like how these states develop their regulatory bodies to respond to AI faster than maybe even the federal government. And so we'll see how that kind of unfolds.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
The intersection of technology with actually making laws that benefit people, right?
All these laws, I mean, you see like the impact also, right? Like Australia is banning social media for up to the age of 15, right? So like you're seeing the good side and the bad side, right? So we saw that with the browser and the advent of the internet. So the same thing will happen with this. I mean, it has to. It just has to.
How's
The
the agentic AI, like from your experience, at least in the healthcare industry, like how is agentic AI being used in that industry right now? I have two questions. So one, that also, I mean, there's so many AI advancements happening rapidly. How are you staying on top of all this?
Yeah. So agents, it's very interesting. There's a lot of manual processes in a hospital that happen. Like think about scheduling and making medication orders and collecting images from this place and sending it to that place. Now all these can be agents that are working together on behalf of the patients or the provider to do it. So we're seeing a lot of orchestration of agents around very specific tasks that required a human now don't, right? We're seeing even for simple things like form filling. Like you can create an agent to take data out of this and fill it in that form. There's actually humans doing it. Now you don't need to do it. You can have a human just review it or even an agent review it, right? And see where the most errors are. So I'm starting to see that advent of at least in healthcare. There are other examples that are more like far-reaching, but like I think for right now, that's where we're seeing a lot more adoption. But these agents can also be frontier models. Like you can have like cutting-edge models built into the agent to make a task, to do a task, right? So I think the future is super exciting there. In terms of how I keep up, like I mean, you just have to read voraciously. Right? There's no other way. I also do recommend people get their hands dirty, build stuff, break stuff, see how it works. I mean, now it's never been easier. Arav and I, like my son and I, are building like a basketball training app for his friends based on their jersey number, so they can choose the jersey number. He's Steph Curry, so we'll bring up all the Steph Curry information on training. Get them in. So that
Yeah.
helps me too, right? I mean, that helps me learn also. Like as I'm going through different models, comparing GPT-4o to Claude and this and that. And it's never been a better time to get your hands dirty with tech right now than now. And that's the best way to learn. But again, reading, keeping up with what's going on, and it's very interesting. Like, Gemini is doing some phenomenal things now too.
Yeah.
So I think like people are moving pretty fast. And I know you guys didn't ask me this question, but what is going to be super exciting and also kind of like not worrisome, but like something to keep track of is how are we going to, like, for example, Google is using their own TPUs to train the models. Are
Yeah.
they going to access TPUs? NVIDIA, obviously, their GPUs.
Yeah.
There's a geopolitical thing going on as well. Like it's going to be super interesting to see what happens, how that evolves. Because
Especially with Taiwan Semiconductor
yeah,
being in Taiwan. I know they're moving some of their production to US.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a lot of areas we can go from
Yeah,
that point.
and
Yeah,
I love the example of the steam engine, right? Like when the steam engine came,
yeah,
it wasn't the first iteration that was the right one. It took like 13 to 15 iterations. The person who was given the credit of inventing the steam engine wasn't the guy who came up with the idea, right? It's like how smartphones. We always say Steve Jobs, but he wasn't the guy who came up with the first smartphone, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
but I do think what's interesting is that if you look at train, the advent steam engine train, people going on the train, it was always the rich that could afford it, right? But over a period of time, the technology became cheaper, 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 where everyone could afford it, right? And that is going to be the super interesting kind of flow that we are going to see with AI, where it truly is available in the hands of everyone, where it enables everyone to be the better version of themselves, hopefully, the right guardrails and obviously responsible AI. But that's the track that like I'm excited about, because then it becomes, where will we go as a humanity next?
Yeah, that's
What is the next exciting area to discover? Yeah, that I think is super cool.
one question I had was about LLMs and the frontier models. Do you see models which are smaller and more specialized because they might be cheaper to kind of run, right? Ultimately, so like for healthcare, you have a healthcare specialized model. What do you see over there?
Yeah, I mean, we totally. I mean, I think like there are models that are very specific. I mean, if you look at medicine in general, it's a highly specialized industry, right? I mean, you go to school for a very long time to become a certain type of physician. They have certain tasks, they have certain areas that they focus on. So these models are very hyper focused on what they do. So yeah, short answer is yes. And I think SLMs in the long term tend to become the most cost effective because you don't need like, I mean, just think if you have a LLM for all healthcare, it has to run 20 all the time. It needs reliability, it needs to have
Yeah,
scalability. The scale is insane to think about the cost of running it, the continuous training. But with an SLM, you could just match the physician's working hours, right? Like there are
yeah,
different ways to optimize it. You could run it on if it's small enough, you can just run it on CPUs versus GPUs potentially can make an API call, like you could build around it, you could wrap, something around it, an interface around it. If it's an API call, there's different ways to kind of work with that technology. But then I think the most important from my perspective, as from the product side, is that it becomes the unit economics work a lot better with SLMs, I
yeah.
think. And again, like I said, your physicians are very focused on their process. You know exactly where to inject your product into that process. I think that's going to be the future, at least for a lot of technology in healthcare.
So what's next for Arun? You've been with Microsoft for 5 years. Do you see, because I think you sort of said in earlier in the podcast that once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur by heart. All things being equal, would you go back into being a full-time, entrepreneur like you were once?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd go into like, CEO mode again, but I would join a funded startup. I don't want to go fundraise, like, I mean, I like to be part of a fundraising group, but I don't want to have to be the one going out there, been there, done that. I think it's a necessary part of the job, but I didn't enjoy it as much. And so, like, I could definitely go in as a CPO, chief product officer, technology officer, like those things I can easily slip into. So, yeah, I mean, that those things I'm very open to. I do think the one more interesting thing, and Vandeep, you brought it up, like in healthcare and AI and where things are going, is that a lot of startups, unfortunately, and this sucks. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur at heart and all that, but like longevity is not there, right? Like in the end, when you go to selling to these providers and they're making big decisions on purchasing, they don't make decisions like this every year, right? They make it 5, 10, 15 years. A brand like Microsoft will still exist, right? And so I'm in this very interesting dilemma where I'm like, the most impact I can have on healthcare may be where I am right now, right? Versus going into a startup and doing it. So it's very interesting for me because it's very, anti-Arun from the way that I like thinking. But it's food for thought for me because I honestly do believe, like, out of all the big tech companies, Microsoft is the best position to make an impact in healthcare just with our current products and where we're going. And it's been fun continuing to do that. So I think it just comes down to where at this point in my career where I can have the most impact. And yeah, so again, it depends on what, but it's been a learning, right? And so that's why what I tell entrepreneurs right now is, again, some people need to be audacious. You need the Elon Musks of the world, right? I mean, that's important for the world to go forward. But you can also find people starting companies that are addressing a particular gap. You get acquired, have financial stability, then swing for the fences, right? Then go for that crazy audacious because you don't have to worry about that stress of like, where's my money coming
Yeah.
from, next paycheck, which can really like impact the founder's journey, right? So, uh, yeah, if I had to do it again, I would have done that. But it's lessons learned. So
I mean, you've got the best of both worlds, right? I mean, you've got you're doing what you like, and and Microsoft continues to invest in healthcare,
yeah,
and you got a branded blue chip company like Microsoft where you don't have to worry about where not just where your next paycheck comes from or where the next amount of funds are coming from, right? So you've
yeah,
got the
but it's
big name
layered, man.
behind it.
Layered. I mean, there's its own matrix. There's its own approvals. I mean, you guys know.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Its
There's
own it's
always
its
blue
own
tape.
pound of flesh, but I think like it's just about I don't know. I think life is a balancing act. And you got to figure out when to press the accelerator and when to, kind of just go with the flow. So they say in big tech, patience is a superpower. It took me a long time to learn that, but yeah, that's
yeah.
Ooh.
Any other things we should be thinking about, or you want to share with the audience, which we haven't covered so far?
No, I mean, I think this is awesome. It was obviously good to see you both, but like
Yeah.
these are it's fun talking about these things. I think in a lot of ways that like, you know, you see the hype, you read the hype, you know, everyone's talking about it, but you know, it's hard to understand what is really happening, right? The pace is so fast. I think that's what I would probably try to get across to people. Don't feel like you're behind. Like it's very easy to feel like the avalanche of information is way too much, but you will see if you're able to focus again on those first principles. I think it's very important to be able to focus on what is going to create a successful product. What does success look like in whatever industry you're in, or generally in AI? And you ground yourself to those, you'll find yourself navigating it a lot more thoughtfully and not getting overwhelmed by the information. Because I see a lot of people that are just excited, overwhelmed with the pace, and like, oh, I got to start a company, I need to do it, or I'm going to lose out. That's not
Yeah.
how it's happening. So I think it's important for people to realize that before making the jump. And you know, I always recommend, start a company, try to do it. It's one of like I said, the best learning experience you'll have. But don't do it because you see someone else doing it. Do it because it's truly a burning problem that you want to solve. Because on the dark days, and there'll be many dark days, that's what's going to get you through to do it another day. And that's super important. Yeah, I can't stress on that.
It's the difference between being an entrepreneur and having a hobby, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I can't, like, I mean, I told you guys, panic attacks, this, that, like, it's not, yeah, it is very,
Not easy. Yeah.
it's not easy. And it's very hard to talk to people about it because no one else has gone through that journey. Right. And that's why every time I talk to an entrepreneur, the first question is like, how are you doing? You know, like, are you okay? It's a very important part of making sure, yeah. And then actually, you know, to be honest,
Yeah.
like it's created great friendships for me as well. Just being a lot more empathetic to their journey and everything that they've gone through. So yeah, it's an important part of the ride. Yeah.
Where can the audience find you? Like, do you want to share something about your website, your project you're working on, or any resource you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, like, you can find me on LinkedIn. You know, I love connecting with people, and yeah, based on, you know, time available. But like, love giving advice. You know, I again, advice is cheap, but you know, happy to help people with, you know, some of the stuff that they're struggling with. In terms of products in my team, I mean, yeah, we're building. You know, we're supporting the Dragon Copilot. I own a couple of Azure services that are doing well. We're obviously trying to launch new things, and I think, like, if you're really passionate about healthcare and product building, you know, I'd love to get connected and chat and, you know, do that. But
If we, if you can provide a brief on what is Dragon Copilot, like what are you trying to solve with that product?
yeah, so Dragon Copilot for physicians is basically, you know, patients and physicians having a conversation. Like, so, you know, just say you go to see your you see your doctor, he's constantly like typing into something, you know, into Epic while you're talking, he's putting in those notes. What this does now is that we have a normal conversation and it gets transcribed and then it gets summarized into a clinical note. So then there's a note that's now available that you review and put into the EHR. So like, it's kind of bringing that humanity back to healthcare where they're not like so focused. Because see, that note is very important in healthcare because that's how they get reimbursed. In that, you know, they'll find the diagnosis, this, that, those get
Yeah.
associated codes, those codes get filed, and then the payer, you know, the insurance company gives money back based on that visit. So it's very important for them to collect it. So being able to give the doctor the time to actually look at the patient, you know, like face to face and have that conversation is what we're doing. And also there's a lot of burnout with physicians around documentation and keeping up with things. So we're kind of helping them also because they're also like, again, they're human too, right? And they go through the same emotions we do. And so being able to do that so they can spend more time with their families, their kids, you know, everything is something that we're excited about. We've expanded. We have physicians. We've expanded to nursing as well, and we have a solution for radiologists as well that we've announced. So, like, you know, going after different parts of the provider ecosystem, but yeah, looking to expand from there into other areas too.
Yeah. Exciting.
Very cool stuff.
All
Cool.
right.
Arun, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on our very first podcast, episode
Woo!
001,
Yeah.
001.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's good
I think
seeing
it
you.
Forever.
was a good conversation
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It was a lot of fun. Hopefully, yeah. I mean, happy to come back again anytime you guys want to talk
for
about it.
sure.
for sure. Thank you again and
All
see
right.
you soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.